finally, kindly note that all of this session will be recorded, and we therefore advise all our participants to be as diplomatic and cautious as possible to avoid all that need not to be recorded. This webinar, as mentioned, is hosted by the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, and the 6th Nile Basin Development Forum was launched on 22nd February 2021, and it will go through for the whole month to 29th April 2021. This year's theme, as I mentioned earlier, is rethinking regional investment in the Nile Basin in water, energy, food, environment, and climate change. And as a matter of fact, wetlands play a pivotal role in linking all these investment sectors. As a result, Nile Basin Initiative for the past 5 years has been working to bring on wetland science, policy, practice, and investment nexus. Conducted baseline and diagnostic studies that has informed policy and investment projects and programs at the landscape and, of course, systemic scale. In this regard, Nile Basin Initiative has developed more than 10 wetland policies, including management plans, water allocation plans, and of course, investment plans. In short, Nile Basin Initiative has brought synergies in social, economic, environment, and mainly on the wetland management context in the region. This session will therefore lead us into exploring the key priorities investment areas for ensuring implementation of the wetland management plan through mainstreaming wetlands in the river basin management and other social and economic sectors. We therefore expect informative keynote speeches, presentation, and round of discussion on the roles of the Ramsar Secretariat in Sustainable Management of Wetlands in the Nile region and, of course, in the globe, systemic wetland management in the basin, specific efforts in establishing wetland management planning in some specific key areas, such as the Siositeko wetland landscape between Kenya and Uganda, Sango Bay Minziro between Uganda and Tanzania, among other wetlands, and regional investment efforts on wetlands as green infrastructure. Therefore, we will have a round of reaction, comments, question, and discussion at the end of the panelist presentation. Just in brief, I would like to introduce our panelists today. The first one is Mr. Zebedee Nsiu, Senior Advisor for Africa, Ramsar Secretariat, who will give us the welcome remarks and, of course, introducing the role of the Ramsar Convention and the centers in the region. And, of course, Nelsap will give an overview of the wetland management in the region. And I would also like to introduce our other key speaker, who is Mrs. Gladys Wekesa, the Director of Transboundary Water Resources, Ministry of Water and Irrigation, and of course, the Technical Advisory Committee member of the Nile Basin Initiative from Republic of Kenya. And she will give us a keynote in Siositeko Wetland Management Plan. We'll also be having Dr. Deogratias Nyangu, the Principal Environmental Officer and Ramsar Focal Point from the Vice President Office, Environment Department from the United Republic of Tanzania, will also give us some keynotes on the Sango Bay Minziro Wetlands Management Planning. And the other key speaker is Ms. Lucy Yango, the Assistant Commissioner, Uganda, the Assistant Commissioner of Wetlands from Uganda, and also a Ramsar Focal Point and the Regional Wetland Expert Group from the Ministry of Water and Environment, Uganda. She will lead us in commenting on the other panelists' presentation on the management plans of transboundary significance in the Nile region. Then thereafter, our colleague Dr. Carlos Juan Sanchez, the advisor of transboundary water management in the Nile Basin from Entebbe, Uganda, will lead us into discussions, panel discussion after the presentation from our colleagues. The other two panelists are Lilian Nyenga, the Regional Program Officer, Wetland International from Eastern Africa, and she will lead us into discussion on the investment program in the Nile Equatorial Lakes region, of course, part of the Nile Basin region. And the other important last one, but not least in importance, is Mr. Maro Anditola, the Acting Regional Coordinator and Program Officer, Water Resources Management and Development of the Nile Basin Initiative, NELSAP, Rwanda, who will present to us a paper on wetland investment program in the Nile region. All these panelists will be accorded with 15 minutes of presentation, for which we request them to kindly adhere to the time. And after that, we'll be having a closing remark from Dr. Juan Carlos Sanchez, and way forward following the cascade of our presentation of our webinars from our regional wetland expert, Mr. Leonard Akwany, who will give us a word before we proceed to the other endeavors of the day. So after that short remark, I would like to now welcome Mr. Zebedi Nsu, Senior Advisor for Africa, Ramsar Secretariat, to give us the welcome remark for our session. You're welcome, Mr. Zebedi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I don't know if my presentation will be shared by you.
I think you can share it. You can share the screen if you have it on mode already. In case of any technical issue, then we will assist you.
Are we getting it?
Yeah, straight away. Just put it in full screen. Yes, thank you. And you're welcome.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank everybody that has made it to this important webinar, most particularly the countries who are parties to the Nile Basin Initiative and also the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. It is a pleasant opportunity for me to meet some of my senior, like Leonard Akwany. It's been a long time, so nice to meet you again. It is a particularly interesting opportunity to talk about wetlands. So not to waste your time, let me take you through what I have prepared. So we all know that wetlands are very important. We are going through some of the significant moments of our life with the COVID-19 pandemic. But one thing that we should note is that we can trust and hope in wetlands and water because they underpin our current economy. They are a promise to protect us from disasters and a solution to the future for the environmental stress and disease. At the moment, there is a lot of benefits that we derive from wetlands, particularly drinking water, jobs, the food that we eat, but also protection. However, wetlands are being depleted globally at alarming rates of about 3 times as much as terrestrial forests. Some studies say that as much as 87% of wetlands have been lost since the 1700s. And this is only where data is available. And the situation is much more dramatic in Africa, where people are much more dependent on natural resources for survival. The Lake Chad Basin, for instance, has shrunk by up to 90%. And Lake Victoria has been transformed drastically. Why are all of these things happening? Populations are increasing, and there's increased dependency on wetlands and natural resources. Ill-planned infrastructure, poor policies, and poor planning is just a tip of the iceberg of what contributes to the depletion of wetlands. Deforestation, wetland conversion, and climate change are those factors that synergize to transform or delete existing wetlands. We have seen transformation of the habitat, but also the species are in danger. They report that over 4,000 wetland-dependent species are in threat of getting extinct. About 76% of freshwater plants and animals have already disappeared. All of these have direct implications on us and increases our vulnerability to climate change, disease. We can see the pandemic, conflict, and food security. Wetland losses are costing us money, and you can see from the presentation how much that equates to. It is alarming. Some of the conflicts around the world and even in Africa are directly linked to water and wetlands. So today I'm trying to give you one of a global response that was initiated in 1971 in a small city called Ramsar to help address some of these problems. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands is one of the first modern multilateral environmental agreements that was put in place to address the loss of wetlands with the purpose to promote the conservation and wise use of wetland resources. Wise use here, we are referring to sustainable management. And to achieve this goal, the Convention on Wetlands employs a variety of approaches, mainly ensuring a network of Ramsar sites and other protected wetlands globally, integrating wetlands into planning and implementation, strengthening legal policies and arrangements all over the world, applying economic incentives in the management, and ensuring participation of stakeholders in the management of wetlands, improving national wetland inventories and tracking wetland extent. So till date, what can we say? The Convention on Wetlands can say today that it has been able to mobilize 171 contracting parties, that is countries who are members to the convention. The convention has been able to enable the formation of 2,416 Ramsar sites, contributing to the initial protection or conservation process of over 254 million hectares of wetlands. When I say initial, you should note that the process of or the formation of a Ramsar site is not an end in itself. It is just the beginning of the process. So today, we have over 230 wetlands of transboundary nature globally, but Africa has only 63. Remember, I told you about the number of Ramsar sites that have been created globally, but Africa has only 15% of that total. Transboundary Ramsar sites in Africa equates to only 5 and globally 34. Ramsar sites, despite their increasing formation, only 10% of those Ramsar sites have management plans in Africa, and globally only 90%. All over the world, only 77 countries have policies that directly address the management of wetlands. And in Africa, just a little bit above 20% of the countries. All countries in Africa have less than 35% of their wetlands with inventory data. So what am I saying? I'm saying that wetlands are important and they will continue to be important in the near future. We have seen that they are being depleted at alarming rates, yet they continue to be important. By 2050, 70% more food and 14% more water for agriculture will be needed for an estimated 10 billion people globally. The Nile Basin covers 11 countries. That is 10% of Africa's landmass and influences over 3 million people. This is an opportunity to meet this growing demand. And how does this initiative meet this demand? By continuing to support countries implement transboundary wetland management in a coordinated manner, including the implementation of the Ramsar Convention, I'm sure these goals will be achieved. A recent publication by the UNESCO highlights the importance of designating sites as international sites of importance, but not just staying there, also going ahead to develop management plans and implementing those management plans effectively has contributed to sustaining ecosystem services like carbon and mitigating the impacts of climate change. The Nile Basin can also be a unique opportunity to address climate change, foster human development by promoting the expansion of Ramsar sites and ecosystem services financing tools amongst riparian countries. And with this, I would like to thank you, and we'll wait for any further questions that participants might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zebedi, for your very nice presentation, giving us the insights of the Ramsar Convention role in wetland management in the region. I will kindly request you to unshare your screen so that we get a chance to share ours. And again, requesting all the panelists to kindly switch off their mics as we are hearing an echo from your end. Thank you. And now, after that very good brief of the global look on the wetland management and actually the link with the management of wetlands in the Nile Basin region, I will be giving the overview of the wetland management in the Nile region for in actually connection to what my colleague Zebedi has made. And as I mentioned formally, this is the 6th Nile Basin Development Forum, and our theme is actually rethinking regional investment in the Nile Basin. And this is in terms of water, energy, food, environment, climate change. And this is the section that is rethinking the investment in wetlands, and mainly the theme is environmental and wetlands, as previously mentioned. and this is mainly on transboundary wetland management. And we have a series of themes which are water-related ecosystem and biodiversity in the coming session, wetlands, peatland and climate change, South Sudan special case on the Sud, and environmental flows assessment and water allocation planning, and of course, the economies of ecosystem services assessment of wetlands in the Nile Basin. But broadly and in connection to what the Ramsar Secretariat is doing and what we have domesticated in the Nile Basin region and supporting countries is actually to achieve sustainable socio-economic development through equitable development of and benefit from the shared Nile Basin water resources and including the wetland resources. And Nile Basin Initiative with its 3 centers have been achieving this through implementation of 6 goals, which is sustainable management and utilization of wetlands, and of course, advocating green and gray infrastructure development, and advocating water and food security, and protecting, restoring, and conserving water-related ecosystem. And one of the most closer related ecosystem is wetlands, and climate change adaptation. Of course, wetlands are quite an important climate change, green infrastructure, and of course, the transboundary water resources governance. All of these are resonating around the 3 pillars of the Ramsar Convention. So to be specific and in connection again to what Ramsar has presented, Nile Basin Initiative in wetland area has been working in 4 thematic areas or 4 pillars, which is science, policy and governance, cooperation, of course, interregional cooperation and investment. And in science, all our work has been actually based in research, diagnostic studies, and of course, baseline studies in areas, among others, the eco-hydrology modeling, of course, the economies of ecosystem, assessment of wetlands, climate change through peat and carbon stock assessment. And all this has informed us on the challenges that are affecting the wetlands, and through determination of the landscape changes, changing in trends in wetlands, and of course the impacts on ecosystem services that are provided by the wetland ecosystems. And of course, after having determined the landscape changes and all that trends and impacts, we worked with partner states, countries, together with the development partners to actually develop the policies and governance structures in the region through development of the Nile Basin wide wetland management framework, and developing the specific transboundary wetland management strategies, frameworks, and of course, action plans, and instituting some of the institutions in the region, transboundary institution, like the wetland management, transboundary management institution, and developing transboundary bylaws, frameworks, MOUs and MOAs, and guidelines that support the countries. And of course, we mainstream wetland, the river management in the river basin management, and we have embraced the knowledge transferring advocacy at all levels, local and at the high level, and of course, networking, and not ending in that, also backed into some other investment projects. And the work in the region is actually from the countries which are the catchment, or the lower countries, which are the DR Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania, way along to the Nile Delta in Egypt. So the Nile Basin Initiative with its centers has actually been working in the science policy practice nexus, in which, as I mentioned, we conducted several baseline and diagnostic studies coupled with other research studies, and of course, translated this science and studies into policy practice through the management planning at the landscape and systemic scale, and of course, upscaling those strategies into investment. So mainly in science policy, as I mentioned, I mean, the Nile Basin has been working baseline studies on hydrology, the economies of ecosystem services, climate change, pit assessment in some areas, and all these studies has been related to the wetland biophysical parameters, impacts or interlink, and of course the ecosystem services, and developed option and action for conservation and sustainable management of the wetland. Thereafter, the basin has developed several wetland management instrument and policies, which has actually ensured mainstreaming them in economic sectors, which are quite important in supporting the livelihood of the communities and countries as well. And this is done through systemic wetland management planning for the framework development that guide countries in how to manage the wetland management. And this is actually a requirement by the Ramsar Convention. And of course, the region has also led into specific transboundary wetland management plan policies. And this, as to date, we have developed the 13 policies that are actually supporting the overarching goal of the Ramsar Convention, and of course the Nile Basin Initiative, and also embarked into mainstreaming wetlands into river basin management. As you can see in here, this is just a sample of some of the wetland management policies that have been developed in the region, and of course, they are now in implementation. And you could see the management plan for the Semliki Delta between Uganda and DR Congo. And of course, you can see Sango Bay Minziro between Uganda and Tanzania. And of course, you could see the other one for Siteko between Kenya and Uganda. And there is also the water allocation plan for the Lower Mara, which is the constitute of the envisaged transboundary water allocation plan between Kenya and Tanzania for the Mara River. So another important work we actually working on the Nile Basin is to ensure the transboundary cooperation and of course advocacy at the grassroots level and to the high level advocacy. And this is actually through consultation and coordination of our national wetland institutions, and of course conducting a consultation, providing support to experts and gain experience from experts, project management, and of course, high policy advocacy at the Nile Council of Ministers through the Nile Technical Advisory Committee, of which to date, they have approved all these policies we are referring to in the region. And we didn't only end up in developing or in conducting science and of course translating science into policy and governance, but also we have developed strategies for scaling up approaches of wetland management, of sustainable use of ecosystem services through investment into the Nile Equatorial Lakes Investment Program. This is the wider regional program, which is calling upon all the economic sectors to actually mainstream their development and investment in river basin management. And of course, wetlands is also a sub-basin-wide investment program, which is also feeding into the wider investment. So the key message in this and what we have been embarking or working on in the Nile Basin regarding to the wetland management is the systemic wetland management in the region, and this is through the environmental protection, through wetlands and watershed management, and of course, climate change. And this is also one of the goal, implementing the overarching goal of the initiative. And of course, in livelihood improvement, investing in projects and programs that are supporting communities in the specific countries, food security, transboundary wetland governance, and of course, more importantly, is mainstreaming wetland management in economic sectors, including power generation, of course, agriculture, and fisheries. And thank you very much for listening to this presentation. We'll, at the end of the day, have a chance to also ask questions. And now I would like to welcome our third presenter, who is Madam Gladys Wekesa, the Director of Transboundary Water Resources, Ministry of Water and Irrigation, and Technical Advisory Committee member from the Republic of Uganda, to kindly give us the keynote in socio-historical wetland management planning, which is shared between Uganda and Tanzania for our insight and understanding. Karibu, Madam Wekesa.
Thank you, Sadiq, but I didn't get you clear. Am I presenting for what is shared between Uganda and Tanzania, or what is shared between Kenya and Uganda?
I apologize. Maybe my origin is still disturbing me, but don't you mind that? You go ahead with the presentation you made between Kenya and.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Sure.
Okay. Good afternoon once again, everyone. I'm going, as you've been told, I'm going to share an overview of the socio-historical transboundary wetland management plan. It's a management plan that was prepared by NELSAP, supported by GIZ, and in collaboration with the two countries, Kenya and Uganda. And so today I'm just going to give you an overview of the management plan. So my presentation outline will be to introduce the project that prepared this plan, and then talk about plan development approach, the status of the wetland, the wetland landscape, issues and threats within the wetland plan, the wetland, that is the socio-historical wetland, management planning framework, and then, okay, there's the issue of implementation strategy, but I don't think I'll present the details now. This program, the Nile Basin Program on Support to Transboundary Water Cooperation in the Nile River Basin, aims at advancing conservation of the Nile Basin transboundary wetlands of regional significance. As all of us are aware, our wetlands have really been degraded. And so we have been trying as countries under the Nile Basin Initiative to see how we can maybe rehabilitate these wetlands and also see how we can sustainably manage the wetlands. Some work has been done in the past, especially on this wetland of the socio-historical. So the work was done, but I think implementation was not done. There was a report, and there was a strategy that was supposed to be implemented, but was not implemented. So we thank the GIZ team for coming in to support this process. Some of the other piloted wetlands that fall under this project are the Semliki in the DRC shared with Uganda, and then the Mango Bay wetland shared. Sango Bay means 0, shared between Tanzania and Uganda. But this presentation will mainly be on COC TECO. Development so many stakeholders, like those who live within, who make maybe policies and decisions that touch on the wetlands. So all these had to be analyzed, and also the analysis of conflicts and gathering information on resource use. The second step was on the resource use analysis. And during this step, there was identification and analysis of key users and benefits of resources, key conservation threats, interventions and actions were prioritized. Then there was the planning, the plan drafting. Oh, sorry. So during plan drafting, there was formulation of management plan, vision, mission, objectives, and management actions, development of budget and implementation framework. And then we had the plan validation, where we had the presentation of draft plan to stakeholders, technical institutions, and policymakers. Then there was a series of meetings held to ensure views from diverse stakeholders included. So this is how the process took place. Then just to look at the basic information on the wetland, we had to the geographical location of the wetland. It covers an area of 415 square kilometers, and the boundaries are consistent with those of the previous community wetland management plan and are based on a combination of topography and the road network. So you can see the map there. It gives the outline of the wetland. It may not be so clear to see the names, but at least you have an idea of where it is located. Geology gives an illustration of the geology. I don't have to go into the details because not all of us understand geology, but it gives the types of soils, the feral soils, and the places where they are found, the planar soils, leptosols. This is important because for wetland to be well managed, you need to understand how to sustain these soils, how to maybe prevent soil erosion, how to preserve the soil texture for you to, to conserve the vegetation in the wetland. Then the landscape, the hydrology, the geostable wetland landscape plays an important role in the hydrology of the catchment and the ecosystem. And the hydrology is actually the water that is flowing through the rivers that feed into the wetland. Then there's the river Sio, which originates south of Mount Elgon near Bungoma. This is the main important river in the area. And it drains into the northeastern corner of Lake Victoria and ultimately joins the Nile. The river is approximately 85 kilometers long, and the catchment covers about 1,400 kilometers squares. This is the flora and fauna found in the wetlands. In the wetland, we have birds, we have fish, we have various species of plants. Then in the social context, the gender, in terms of gender, we have 52% female and 48% male. This is in Busia, that is in Busia, and that's Busia, on the Busia side, on the Ugandan side. And then on the Kenyan side, we have the same gender, distribution. In terms of age, you can see the distribution. Then we talk of urban versus rural. Urban is 17% in the Ugandan side, and rural is 83%. On the Kenyan side, we have 16% urban population, and then 84% rural. And so you can see the distribution of what we get from the basic needs from the wetland. We have potable water, electricity for cooking, we have electricity for lighting, then education. So we're looking at what benefits that are there, they are accessible within the wetland, both in Kenya and Uganda. The land cover, we have trees, we have shrubs, we have grassland, we have cropland, and water. Then we have within the plan has categorized ecosystem services in the wetland. And we have provisioning services, which include food, drinking water, water for irrigation, fuel wood and timber, fiber, fish, medicine. And then we have regulating and supporting services. We have carbon capture and storage. We have a habitat, we have water purification, pollination, water storage and recharge. We have flood control and maintenance of soil fertility. We also have cultural services. These include recreation and tourism. We have spiritual experience, aesthetics, research, inspiration for culture and art. In terms of the value of the ecosystem services, for the provisioning services, the value has been given. So in terms of fish, that is the amount you have. I mean, in terms of value, those are the figures. So others that have been valued: water for domestic use, livestock grazing, crop farming and irrigation, sand harvesting, grass harvesting, aquaculture, wood energy, mat making, other wetland and other wetland products that are non-wood. So these are the services that you get within the wetland and their value. And then regulating and supporting services have also been valued. So, so you have soil fertility and moisture pollination, water quality, flood control, carbon storage and sequestration, habitat, biodiversity. All this, when you look at it now, you can understand their value. In cultural services, you have the nature-based cultural, nature-based tourism and cultural values have also been valued. Then provisioning services. So the total value has been given for both for all the provisioning, regulating, and cultural services, and that is the total sum of the values, the value of services that we get from the wetland. Then there was stakeholder analysis that was done. So I'm not getting some distraction from this. I don't know where to put it. So we have private sector, faith-based organizations, media. So we're looking at high influencers, the people, I mean, with stakeholders of high influence and those with low influence. High influence, We have private sector, faith-based organizations, and then media. And then we have local government departments, development partners, regional institutions, NGOs. Then we have, on the lower side, we have the interest. So we have those with high interest and those with low interest. So within the low interest, you have the transporters, tour operators. Then with high interest, you have the direct wetland users, the primary stakeholders. And these are mostly maybe the communities that live within the wetland. Then environmental committees, and then those we have with specific names, the Bumasi, Luma, NGOs within the basin. Then also now, with high interest also, we have the regional institutions, NGOs, development partners. Section 4 of the plan deals with issues and threats facing the geospatial wetland landscape. And this includes the drivers, pressures, state impact response framework. This framework, the framework was designed to look at the threats, the issues and the threats facing the geospatial wetland. And so it was used to understand, synthesize, and visualize the cause-effect interactions of the wetland, landscape, and development potential actions for improving the implementation of sustainable wetland conservation and management interventions in the geospatial wetland landscape. And this has been described, the framework has been described within the plan. The plan also deals with policy and legal, the policy, legal, and institutional context. So we realize that the sustainable management of wetland resources is not limited to the physical management, but also incorporates the institutional framework of legislation, policies, economic tools, and the institutions and stakeholders involved in wetland management. So there are several multilateral environmental agreements and national policies and legal frameworks, both in Uganda and Kenya, that are relevant to the management and conservation of the geospatial transboundary wetland. The development of this management plan seeks to implement such frameworks at the local level. So we have these policies, we have policies at national level, we have plans, we have strategies, but through this plan, we'll be able to implement some of the policies that we have at national level, both in Uganda and Kenya. So this is a framework, the DPSIR framework, and it's for describing interaction between society and environment. Okay, so you have the driving forces, which include rapid population growth, weak governance systems and structures, inadequate awareness, widespread poverty. And then you come to the pressures. This one's, okay, now the drivers generate the pressures. So you have the pressures as over exploitation of natural resources. And then we also have unsustainable resource use practice. And then we have poor landscape planning, invasive species. And then these influence the state. This include deterioration of water quality and quantity, and declining fish diversity and abundance, and loss of habitat, breed grounds, and soil degradation. And in the end, the impact is loss of income, and then species loss, damage to human health. And so with this analysis, it's possible to know what interventions can be put in place to make sure that the wetland is well managed. So we have like the responses here, strengthen governance systems and structures, enhanced enforcement, outreach and education, resource use management, protected areas. We have to make sure that our bylaws are enforced. Then we also encourage participatory monitoring and landscape restoration, and sustainable livelihood improvement, institutional development, and also enhance the CEPA programs. So the vision of the plan is to have a well-conserved geosteco wetland system, sustainably utilized for economic benefits in a harmonized transboundary relationship. The objectives include promote conservation of geosteco ecosystem and its catchment, promote sustainable livelihoods for geosteco community, and the third one is to strengthen transboundary governance structures. And the actions have been listed. Some of them include enhanced protection of wetlands to improve water quality and quantity, integrate wetland-wise use into river basin development planning, and then promote conservation of woods and vegetation for socioeconomic and ecological benefits, promote sustainable fishing and aquaculture for improved fish diversity and abundance, and rehabilitate and restore 5% of degraded wetland diversity annually. For the second objective, the plan will promote, for the actions, the plan will promote paludiculture on 6 acres for ecological and socioeconomic benefits. It will promote conservation of wetland resources and cultural heritage for ecotourism, promote adoption of sustainable agriculture, promote value addition of capture, fisheries, and aquaculture to improve the value chain. Then for the third objective, the actions include enhanced transboundary coordination and cooperation of transboundary wetland institutions, enhanced communication, education, and public participation and awareness. There's an implementation structure, but I don't have it here. Maybe NESAP can project it later. I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Gladys, for the very insightful and brief discussion. And we will be embarking into some question and answers. And as of now, there are some questions that are actually being posted on the chat box. So kindly, if you have a look and try to respond to some, and we'll summarize some of them later as we go ahead during the question and answers session. And now I would like to welcome another panelist who is going to present on Minziro Forest Wetland Management, Transboundary Wetland Management Plan, which is actually a constituent of the Sango Bay in the Ugandan part. And he will be having 10 minutes to lead us into this presentation. And that is none other than Dr. Deogratias Nyangu from the Vice President Office, Environment, the United Republic of Tanzania. So Dr. Nyangu, please, you can kindly share your screen and go ahead. Dr. Nyangu, I'm not sure that you are hearing us. While Dr. Nyangu is perhaps in preparation, I would like to thank the government.
Yeah, Sadiq, I can hear you.
Thank you. So you can kindly upload your presentation.
Yes.
Yes, before you proceed, you would like to finish the statement thanking the government of Ethiopia for actually hosting this webinar, a series of webinars for this 4 weeks, starting today to 29th of April. And of course, the government of Uganda for hosting the Nile Basin Secretariat and of course hosting these technical aspects of the webinar today. So Dr. Nyangu, kindly, you can go ahead in leading us through the Sango Bay Minziro Transboundary Wetland Management Planning and perhaps the governance issues that are going ahead in even establishing the transboundary wetland management between the two countries. Welcome, Dr. Nyangu.
Thank you, Sadiki. Yeah, for the past, I will say 2 years, we've been working closely with our colleague from Uganda with your guidance in trying to have the transboundary wetland management with both in two countries. As you may be aware, the Sango Bay is already a Ramsar site, but the part of Tanzania, we are in the process of designate the Minziro forest reserve. Also, it's part of the wetlands to be the Ramsar site. In fact, we are in the very final stages. Probably in 2, 3, 4, 5 days to come, we'll be uploading the Ramsar information sheet for the Minziro or Kagera proposed Ramsar sites area. So on the subject matter of today, I'm going to give the highlight on the transboundary wetland management of this transboundary wetland management of Sango Bay Minziro. My presentation will cover those areas, the areas facing. We'll talk about multilateral environment. I'll talk about the policies which are governing the wetland management of these two countries. Also, we'll go on legal and the regulatory framework on both sides. And also we'll talk about the management actions and activities which are anticipated to be conducted in this transboundary area. Also, we look on the implementation mechanism and see the monitoring of this transboundary wetland management. So as you can see, that's the map showing those two parts. The upper part showing the Uganda side, which is the Sango Bay part, which I've already said that it's already the Ramsar site by itself there. But on Tanzania side, this is the forest areas, but we have the wetlands, which we are planning soon also will be the Ramsar site. So, as I've said, these two areas, they're similar in common ecological. So this wetland management plan was developed according to the Ramsar Convention guideline, try to promote the sustainable use of the wetland resources of these two areas. And also, the plan is in line also according to the national policies and the legal framework of these two countries. And as all you might be aware, the areas is really for, there is a lot of agricultural practices going around those areas as a means of livelihood means. So based on that, you might find that the area is really facing a lot of challenges. There is illegal logging in those two areas. As I've said, they have in common ecologically, and basically there is in the past there were a big incidents of illegal logging, and which was really threatening to the big deforestation, especially for valuable timber, spruce trees, podocarpus. Also, the area is now facing the low agricultural productivity, and there is a big intensification on the land due to the pressure, the growing of the population in that particular areas. But the area also is facing the poverty nature, the land degradation, which also caused by those I've just said, the illegal logging, deforestation, and sustainable agriculture, which is going on in that areas. But overfishing, which is also caused by the illegal fishing, which is, you might find those areas using sustainable fishing nets, fishing gears in general. Also the areas, people in those areas are cattle keepers. So you find that there is a overgrazed in that particular areas. So based on those challenges, you might find that these two countries have low enforcement activity, which is very minimal. So that's why with this coming, the transboundary management will enable to share the practical means of managing these areas. These two countries, Uganda and Tanzania, have also key parties, and they've signed the multilateral environmental agreements, which are related to the wetland management. So to mention the few, some conventions and the agreement which are related to wetlands is by itself this a unique one, the Ramsar Convention on Wetland International, which for Tanzania part we signed on 2000. And we are also party for Convention on Biological Diversity. In fact, all these conventions and the agreements, both Uganda and Tanzania are part to this multilateral agreements. Both these two countries, Uganda and Tanzania, they have policies which are governing the management of wetland in both two countries. So to mention some, in Tanzania, we have a national environmental policy, a national water policy, the national wildlife policy, and the national forest policy. The Uganda also, they have national wetland policies and the wetland sector strategy plan, which also governing the management of the wetland in this area. Talking on the legal and regulatory framework, both two countries, they have, in fact, I should say this, there is no single standing alone the regulation which governing the managing the wetland in both two countries. But you might find that in some related legislation in these countries, you find there are some statements which governing the management of the wetland management. And I've just recited some few acts. In Tanzania, we have Environmental Management Act, we have Water Resources Management, Forest Act, Wildlife Conservation, Land Act, Fishery Act. But for the Uganda side, we have also National Environmental Act of 1995, Local Government Act of 1997, Water Act of 1995, and the Land Act of 1998. So now let's look on the this transboundary management of Sango Bay Mean Zero. Basically, it has 4 parts that are guiding us on the action to be taken that will lead the sustainability and the wise use of the resources of this wetland in these two countries. We have the ecological restoration. As I've said there is a lot of destruction in these two parts, the shared parts. Basically, we want to restore the resources which are found there in that area, especially the water. But also the management will be focusing on improving the community livelihood through sustainable land management by ensuring that the community surrounding those areas, they have possibilities of having an alternative income generating activities that will lead to the reducing the pressure to that areas which are close nearby. But there is other two actions. This is a cross-cutting, that's institutional, and the governance. This basically will involve the electing members from the lower community level to up to the national levels in trying to govern the transboundaries. And basically we will have the joint management team between the Sango Bay and the Minziro, both from local up to the national level. But the important part will be also the communication and the awareness. We think this is a very important part because it's a continuing process. We have started it during the development process, and it will be continuing up to the implementation period. So this will engage different categories of communities by providing the training, capacity building, exchange visit, and the awareness creation among the resources users in these two sides of the countries. As I've said, to achieve what we have planned, we have put at least our resources into 4 or 5 resources which are found in that areas: water, land, tree, biodiversity, and livestock. So we have some statements that we think that are very important that we should adhere on so that we reach our goal in management of these wetland resources. So we are saying that we should have a wise use of water resources in Sango Bay Minziro wetlands, and also proper land use practice should be really key things to improve the livelihood on this area. Also, we are aiming to promote the stable use of tree resources within the transboundaries by formulating bylaws in both the 2 parts, the Tanzania part and the Uganda part, but also ensuring the use of this sustainability in the sustainable, the use of biodiversity in sustainable manner. Also the food crops. As I've said earlier, this part of the countries, there are mainly activities, they are agriculture by nature. So we have to make sure that the agriculture, the product for food crops which are produced have to be really in the sustainable manner. But also the livestock keepers in this area, they have to ensure that they all are maintained in a sustainable. The host is showing me that I have 5 minutes. I think I'll manage to finish within that time. In fact, I'll be the last slide is, yes, yeah. We are saying that in ensuring the management of transboundary for Sango Bay Minziro, the monitoring and evaluation will be a continuous process. The evaluation of what we have been doing in terms of information that we are getting, the data we are collecting, the knowledge generated will be a key part on the improving the area, will involve the collaboration of both from the national to the district level officials. We know that the communities need to be the central part of this management planning. So this will be a collaborative and the participatory means of managing the wetland resources of these two sides. I think, Sadiq, I managed to keep into 10 minutes you provided, and I'll be ready for question if you are there. Thank you
very much,
Sadiq.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. It has been a very site-specific, insightful presentation. And the good thing is that this is a transboundary wetland being managed by the two countries, both Uganda and Tanzania. And therefore, after your presentation, I would like to welcome Madam Lucy Iyango, the commissioner of the assistant commissioner of wetlands in Uganda, to actually give us some insights in 10 minutes or less on the wetland management, of course, between the three landscapes, Siositeko, Sango Bay, Minziro, and Semliki, but specifically to Semliki. And thereafter, I welcome Dr. Juan Carlos Sanchez to lead us into a 10-minute discussion. Welcome, Madam Lucy. I'm not sure whether Madam Lucy Iyango is online. Please, the technical team assist us to help her to come in. Meanwhile, we'd like to thank the co-conveners of our webinar, which are Wetland International, POS, Greenwald Maya Center, UNDP, GEF, International Water Management Institute, African Union, Ramsea, EAPP, and of course, our partners, the European Union, German cooperation through GIZ, and World Bank. We also thank all participants for joining us, and of course, the continuous asking of questions through writing, and thanking all panelists who are actually responding them as we go ahead. So, Madam Lucy Iyango, if you are on, please, you're welcome. Actually, we had her in the beginning, and now she's not in. And I would like to welcome Wetland International if there is any reaction towards these management plans. You're welcome, Lillian.
Thank you, Sadiki, and thank you to the presenters. One of the things from these management plans that is important to mention is the implementation frameworks that have been developed, have been set up to support the implementation. One of the challenges that we had when we were doing this, developing the management plans, was that if you develop them without anyone to implement, then they will just stay on the shelves. And I think that is one of the running themes for this webinar. So together with the countries, we set up, oh, Lucy is back. Okay, let Lucy continue.
Lucy, one minute, Lucy, as Lillian is completing her last statement, and then you're straight away welcome. Lillian, please.
All right.
Thank you, Sadiki. So setting up these committees that will oversee implementation of the management plan, to have dialogue on issues that, for example, as I have seen in the chart, that differ between the countries, and come to an agreement. And this includes memorandum of understandings or bylaws, which would support the enforcement between these two countries. Thank you very much. I'll let Lucy continue.
Thank you, Lillian. Lucy, you have 5 minutes to please comment on management plans.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope I can be heard.
Surely we hear you loudly and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to begin by making this statement that ecosystems have no boundaries, while people have created administrative boundaries for purposes of governing these ecosystems. So it is therefore our responsibility to guard these fragile ecosystems, and we need to ensure through our actions that they are heard. And of course, the use of transboundary wetland management plans is one of those, given the threats that are eminent in the areas that we work in. I want to thank at this point the organizers and the presenters and all of you participants for being part of this process. And I would just like to make 3 or 4 comments in regard to this transboundary wetland management systems. One, we need to consider that there is an issue of food security and water security. And in order to balance both, we must inculcate sustainable wetland management practices. And one of the ways of doing this is through the use of these management plans. The other issue that will ensure sustainability is the fact that we need to ensure that participation of the so-called stakeholders, both direct and indirect, the local community, the private sectors, the ministries, departments, and agencies, the private sector, the individuals, is actually ensured throughout this process. And one of the things that have followed through the 3 management plans is the fact that we have ensured as much as possible the involvement of these people in these activities. We have indeed reached a milestone in ensuring that we have these management plans. But then what do we need to do next? One of the things that we need to do, and all the presenters have pointed on this, is we need to ensure that the policy and legal frameworks are enabling. Uganda is blessed to have a policy which is under review, and we are also going to develop a wetland act, because we have seen although wetlands are in 10 acts, we are still having a lot of encroachment. We believe that with a separate act, we will be able to avert the current rate of encroachment. The other thing, which is very important, and I would like to thank the Ramsar Secretariat for being here, one of our obligations as contracting party members is to ensure international cooperation, which can come in form of bilateral and multilateral cooperation. And I think the cooperation we have been able to garner from Kenya, from Tanzania, and ourselves as we are the common denominator in all this is a testimony of the fact that this is very, very important. At the end of the day, governance is key. And I think we also need to recognize greatly the role of the local governments within which these ecosystems fall. We need to bring them on board. And of course, adding to this is the fact that awareness, sensitization, and capacity development has to be part and parcel of this process. If the attitude of people does not change and they only know it is not reflected in their practices, then we have wasted time. So we need to ensure that as we put in place these governance systems, awareness which is targeted, which is stakeholder specific, continues as we continue to implement. I am happy to say that Uganda has a manual on wetland management planning, both at local community level, which is a specific site, and also at framework management level. And I think this has been one of the tools and one of the advantages that we have used throughout this process as we developed these management plans. Now, the involvement of the development partners is good, but we need to take up that mantle from them and put in place in our individual and respective jurisdictions, and that is the local government, financing that begins to implement some of those actions that do not require a lot of money. We need to actually show, we need to show commitment and also ownership of the entire process. So I thank the development partners, yes, but mine is to challenge us colleagues to put in place systems and procedures that ensure that when they come back to check, there is something that we have done. As I conclude, we cannot underscore the rate of degradation of wetlands across in all the countries. We cannot also underscore the fact that the population pressure is high. We cannot also not mention the fact that our policies and our legislation has some gaps because sometimes it is conflicting with others. We cannot also overemphasize the fact that we need to improve on our planning. Now, at the end of the day, in order for us to inculcate conservation within ourselves and within the primary stakeholders, we need to employ incentives and disincentives concurrently, but with emphasis on the carrot. Before we bring out the stick, let us emphasize on the carrot, so that, and also let us emphasize in cultivating positive attitude towards this resource. It is only then that we can be able to boast in future to the next generation that we have a legacy that we have left behind, and it is in form of the wetlands that whose management plans we have implemented. I think for me, in terms of comment, that is what I want to say. But of course, notwithstanding the fact that we also have to appreciate the role of wetlands in climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lucy. It has been a very insightful comment, and you have always been a very good commentator and a champion in wetland management in the region, and we really appreciate that. And due to the shortage of time, we'll be having a 5 minutes question and answers session, which will be led by Dr. Juan Carlos Sanchez. And thereafter, at the end of the session, if we'll be having an ample time remaining, then we'll extend the question and answer session. So Carlos, you are at liberty of having 2 questions from the chat and direct to any of the panelists who will respond them accordingly. Carlos, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Sadiki. Basically, what we have been noticing is that many of the questions gravitate around 2 different key areas. One of them is governance, of course, and this is very much linked also to the topic of effectiveness. How effective are these management plans? So I think we have to recall one very important thing is that they were just very recently approved. Just in June, they were approved by the Nile Basin Initiative governance structures, and congratulate also the countries for spearheading those efforts even in these pandemic times. But also to understand that within those management plans that have been just very much recently being approved by the countries, understand that there are governance mechanisms inserted in each of them as a means for implementing. Now that we have approved those management plans, now we start that period of 10 years for implementation of those specific strategic actions and targets that are contained within each of the management plans. So we can only measure effectiveness at the end of that 10-year period when we look back and understand if things have stayed the same, if things have improved, or if things have deteriorated. Hopefully it's going to be the first one. But I think there's 2 things that we would like to highlight. One of them is that the governance structures, they have been set up in place, and I think we will have specific bilateral dialogues with several of the colleagues that have raised this point. And the second one is that, of course, we need financial flows and to rethink investments in the region. as a means of bringing capital for implementing those management plans. And that links to the second part of this webinar. But I would like perhaps to give the floor to Madame Wekesa to bring us a little bit into that context of governance and implementation mechanisms, as there's one specific question, for example, from Richard Kimbowa, that says co-management arrangements of COCTECO differ in Kenya and Uganda. And what we are proposing is that even though there are imbalances between the structures in Uganda and in Kenya, the management plan contains itself a mechanism for implementation. But if Madame Wekesa is with us, we would like to give her the floor just to address this as a sample of one of the key things that have been raised during the Q&A session. Thank you, Sadiki.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Okay, I'll respond to the governance issue. As you rightly put it, we are two governments, but when it comes to a joint initiative, like activities touching on our shared, let's say, wetlands or shared river basins, we normally have some mechanism in place. It could be an MOU to implement those activities. For these plans, as it has been said, they are still new. They were just recently adopted by countries. Okay, we worked on them jointly, but validation was just recently. And so we will be working on mechanisms on how we can implement them jointly. Institutions will differ, institutions and mandates differ from country to country, but when it comes to such a joint activity, we have mechanisms in place. We're already working with Uganda, like for Kenya and Uganda, we already have existing institutions. We work together through the Nile Basin Initiative, NELSAP, and also we have an existing MOU that covers that wetland. We are also reviewing it at the moment. And so we are not really worried. We were not really worried about maybe the mechanism that may differ within countries, but because we know that when it comes to the joint mechanisms, we'll be able to implement the activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Wekesa. Carlos, we reserve some other question for later on at the end of the session, where we'll give another round of questions regarding to the panelist presentations made earlier today. And now we'll embark into another section, which is actually on the wetland investment. And this is mainly on the fact that dealing with science or developing a lot of knowledge without translating it into policy and governance to actually curb some of the challenges that are affecting wetland resources, and of course, the livelihood of the communities at the grassroots level will mean less if there is no investments which are actually translating into the lives of the communities. I therefore would like to welcome our colleagues and partners in the region, the Wetland International, who have been working with us in translating these policies into investment projects and the program to give us a presentation on the opportunities on the investment in wetland management in the region. Lillian, please, you're welcome. You have 10 to 15 minutes. Less than that will be appreciated. Karibu.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sadiki. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. If you allow me, I will switch off my camera. I see my bandwidth is getting low as I proceed. So basically, picking up from where colleagues have left, some of the issues that have been raised from the previous discussions actually revolve around the key priorities in the region. And indeed, investment areas. How do we finance, how do we implement these transboundary wetland management plans? How do we ensure that these plans actually deliver on their promise? So you've already heard, for example, from the previous presenters, the services that this rich wetlands provide, not just to people, but also the wider wetland landscapes. And studies have actually been conducted by the Nile Basin Initiative on the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity for the 3 wetlands that confirm this value and actually going to paint a picture on their worth. I believe that the process and finer details on economic valuation will actually be presented in another webinar next Monday, so look out for that. But for these 3 wetlands, what these studies actually show and what is important for this discussion is that for Siositeco, we find that the ecosystem valued at $75 million per year, $28 million per year for the Semliki Delta wetland, and for Sango Bay Minziro, it's $236 million. So this valuation just looks at both the direct and indirect services, for example, food, flooding control, water recharge, water quality, and cultural values. And what this shows is that the conservation of this ecosystem is not only of local importance, but it would also contribute to other national, regional, and also, if I may, international environmental targets. Now, looking at this snapshot of the categories of ecosystem services, I've picked one wetland site, the Semliki Delta. You would see, for example, the issue of carbon capture comes in, the issue of food comes in. And these targets, for example, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Aichi targets touch on biodiversity, which is captured here on refugia, habitat, pollution. We have the UNFCCC on climate change, carbon capture. You can see how they actually contribute to these international targets, as well as, of course, at the local and at the regional level. And you've already mentioned, I think Zabedi talked about implications of wetland loss actually cost us money. So what are these conservation investment plans and why do we need them? Basically, the conservation investment plan are frameworks that are aimed at guiding strategic investments and programs within the wetland landscapes. These investments are aligned to the overall vision of the Transboundary Wetland Management Plan. So they do not just come from anywhere, but are actually implementing what is in the Transboundary Wetland Management Plan. It is basically a resource mobilization instrument that gives us justifications for funding to address the needs that may have been unmet. Madam Gladys talked about Siositeco, for example, that there was a management plan that was developed but not implemented. And when we went to the ground, one of the things that we found was that it was not implemented because there was no particular institution that was said to support the implementation, as well as some of the framing of these projects was too broad, not very specific, no donor was identified. So, and this actually gives a justification for this conservation investment plan. So 3 conservation investment plans have been developed for these wetland landscapes. We have for Sango Bay Minziro between Uganda and Tanzania. We have Semliki, Uganda, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Siositeco for Uganda and Kenya. And these processes have been developed by the Nile Basin Initiative with both the financial and technical support from GIZ. And what Wetlands International did was to support these processes to develop the plans and the conservation investment plan. In terms of the plan development approach, plans were, of course, developed in a participatory manner. And this involved key stakeholders right from the beginning, from the plan management process that you've had Madam Gladys mentioned for Siositeco. And it involved processes such as defining the scope and identifying the conditions and trends. How does the wetland look like? And these were done during the plan development of the management plan. And this was followed by a prioritization process. It's 10 years. How do we stagger the activities throughout the 10-year period? So the stakeholders identified and prioritized activities for the short term, for the medium term, and the long term. And the financing needs that are outlined in the conservation investment plan are actually intended to supplement what is there, what is existing. So there is, of course, funding. Things are going on the ground. So we have to complement what is going on. And as such, what the CIPs did, looked at the institutional frameworks and harmonized, integrated, and aligned with existing interventions in the wetland landscape. So this avoids duplication of effort and also saves stakeholders the time in terms of repeating what was already done, studies that have already been done, but rather building on what is there. You've heard about the other two wetland sites. I will spotlight the Semliki Delta by giving you an overview of the conservation investment plan from this delta. So as I mentioned, it is shared by Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And this wetland faces similar threats as have been mentioned in the previous wetland. And these threats, the issues were identified in the management plan. And of course, they also identified several management actions. And from these actions, the stakeholders picked bankable projects, 6 bankable projects. Those that they think could, be able to attract funding to implement. And these projects have actually been classified into 3 main investment areas and plans. And the total investment value of this plan is $65 million to be implemented over a period of 10 years. They look at 3 main areas of coverage. The first area is on ecosystem protection and restoration. So addressing the issues to do with wetland degradation, conservation and vice use of the wetland ecosystem. And this is a good example of before and after restoration from the same site. Secondly, issues to do with livelihood improvement. So restoring and conserving ecosystems to ensure that they actually function at an optimum and are able to provide these values to the people who depend on them. Then the third issue is on enhancing transboundary governance mechanisms. So ensuring that countries talk to each other, actors with even on the ground speak to each other, agree on areas that they may differ on in terms of wetland use. And these are actually some of those that we found on the ground. For example, on fisheries between Kenya and Uganda, they have different co-management arrangements. So they need to agree on what on areas where they can meet in the middle ground and enforce and ensure compliance as well. So in terms of the goals and intended outcomes, I will not go through this, but they actually speak directly to the 3 areas that I've mentioned on governance, on livelihood improvement, and on ecosystem protection and restoration. So we had to also develop these goals and intended outcomes. They came from the stakeholders themselves. What is most important is how will this conservation investment plan actually be coordinated and delivered. So for each of the 6 bankable projects, we identified relevant focal points or implementers from either government or civil society, implementing partners and local communities. So ensuring that it is actually all inclusive and leaving no one behind. And the rallying call is that there's nothing for us without us. So the communities are actually very much involved in each of the projects that are identified. It also provides clear linkage between the various actors that are responsible for various activities in various stages. For example, as I mentioned, the short, medium, and the long term. And the focal point agency was actually nominated to coordinate specific project activities and oversee successful implementation of the plan. And this is just a snapshot of how these investment project areas would look like. The first investment project area, looking at creating community conservation areas, going to specifics, where is this going to take place? And like donors actually want to see what, where, and how. So this is actually very specific in that sense, and including the budget as well. And in terms of the lead implementing agencies, the Ministry of Water, for example, in Uganda, was nominated to oversee the projects. From DRC, the sister ministry as well. And in terms of implementing partners, those that are of course relevant to the projects are also identified, and those of course that also have ongoing projects that would build onto what this conservation investment plan had identified. Of course, potential donors were identified, and this is of course not exhaustive. So if you're here and you'd want to put some money into it and you don't see your name, don't be scared. Of course, it's still open. Livelihood improvement, same thing. I will not go through it. We identified the bankable projects, and of course, who would be the implementing agency, the partners, a lot of acronyms I know, and of course, the potential donors. Investment project area 3, in terms of the governance aspect, this as well was identified and also budgeted for. So one of the things that GIZ with NBI have done is to sort of demonstrate that this can actually happen. And what they have done is to set up what you call the early investment projects. And how it is framed is that this will actually enable, catalyze, and influence investments on the ground. An example is if you look at the first project area on ecosystem protection and restoration. They have put some seed funding that will enable the better management and restoration of, for example, 50 hectares of the wetland landscape. And what this does is to actually catalyze more donors, investments to come in and to start putting in money based on the lessons, based on experiences, the good practices that have been identified from implementing this small area. So this catalyzes additional investments. And of course, when others see what is happening on the ground, it influences further investments. It influences people to start, safeguarding this transboundary wetland, and then moving into the river and lake basin system. So talking about linking it with river basin management and planning as well. In terms of 3 key areas of action that we see from this conservation investment plan. First of all, it is urgent for countries to raise wetland conservation ambition. And by raising the wetland conservation ambition, integrate values of wetlands into development plans. And for example, district development budgets in Uganda. And this will, of course, help us to move closer to these goals that I mentioned already. Scale up action and investment in wetland conservation and management. As I said, something is already happening on the ground. Uganda has several projects on wetland conservation and management. So this needs to be scaled up, and there's need for further investment for this. Secondly, implementing these conservation investment plans actually provides an opportunity to strengthen transboundary cooperation for environmental sustainability. When you see governments, when you see communities, when you see people within the border start talking to each other, it strengthens this cooperation when they move towards a shared vision in that sense. Thirdly, and most importantly, is that local actors are key to delivering on wetland conservation and management. And as such, they need to be involved right from the beginning. They need to be involved in this implementation. They need to see results and how this links to their livelihoods, to the use of the wetlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lillian, for your presentation. And I will now like to welcome our last presenter, Mr. Maro Anditola, who is the Acting Director of the Nile Equatorial Lake Subsidiary Action Program, who will take us through on the initiative taken by the Center into implementing the investment program for the wetlands. Welcome, Mr. Tola. And please help us to keep the 10 minutes or less so that we have the roundup session. Thank you.
Okay, I will take you through the presentation, and the presentation title is the Nile Equatorial Lakes Wetland Investment Program. In short, we call it the NELWIP. I'll give the background, the objectives, the areas where the program will be implemented, the concept and the institutional setup, expected output and the program cost and duration. As already mentioned, the NELWIP is a part of the NELIP, and you can see that it is going to fit in within the wheel of the NELIP, which already was approved by our Nile Council of Ministers. But also, the projects that have been identified were also prioritized during the 2015 NELCOM. So we are not really going out of the Nile Council of Ministers decision. Also, the NELWIP comes from the already implemented projects that we have just talked, the biodiversity conservation and sustainable utilization of ecosystem services of the wetland of transboundary relevance in the basin. And this project came up with outputs, the management plan, which you have seen have been presented, the CIPs, the economic of ecosystem biodiversity, the carbon stock. So all these NELWIP has collected all the information from these outputs and to prepare the program. The objective of the NELWIP is to improve the living conditions and the incomes of rural populations in the transboundary watersheds based on managing those wetlands resources sustainably. The direct and indirect impact include employment opportunities, drinking water supply, agricultural and livestock production. Outcomes of the NELWIP will be enhanced household incomes and livelihoods, as well as food security, poverty reduction, and protecting the environment. The project areas already you have been shown. We have the Mara River wetland between Kenya and Tanzania. A management plan has been developed there, plus the environmental flow assessment. We have the Sango Minziro wetland shared between Uganda and Tanzania, Semliki Delta, the Sio Malaba, and the Rueru and Shahoha wetlands. The concept is that this project will actually be implemented, first designed and implemented jointly between NELSAP, between the LVBC, and between the LIF 3 project. Of course, we have already submitted to African Development Bank the concept, and there were studies which came, there were comments that they brought up saying that it's better if we could have joint implementation, regional implementation institutions between NELSAP and LVBC. Based on that, therefore, the products or the projects under the Semliki Delta, already we pushed them and they have been captured under the Lake Edward Albert Fisheries Phase 3 project, which is already being designed between Uganda and DRC. So this, the activities under that from the CIPs and the management plans are already in the LIF 3. And then we decided to have component A, which is the cross-border wetland landscape, and the EFLOS, and the Akanyaru marshland, the Siosteko, Sangobe, and the Mara, this will be implemented by the project management unit at NELSAP. And then lake and basin water quality will be implemented by LVBC. Now, all this, we are calling it the Lake Victoria Basin Environmental Program. There will be a regional project management unit at that level. And of course, the financiers who will finance the investments would come from probably FDB, JEF, and the GCF. We are expecting to have a detailed implementation planning within 1 year, and then wetland-based livelihood measures to be implemented, biodiversity conservation measures to be implemented, and the capacity development measures. The duration of the program is envisaged to be 6 years, including the designing phase, and the estimate cost, 130 million. This comes from the CIPs, which already Lillian has presented, and the costings of the activities within the management plan. Thank you so much for listening. I would be ready to get any questions and clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maro Anditola, the acting regional coordinator for the Nile Equatorial Lake Subsidiary Action Program, for your good presentation and insights on the way forward from the science, policy governance, and of course, investment in wetland management program. Now we will have 5 minutes before we close our session. And I might perhaps give 1 minute to each of the Nile Equatorial Lakes Technical Advisory Committee member to give us the comment and perhaps a question. But before that, as mentioned by my colleagues throughout the presentation, there is a need to mainstream wetlands conservation investment into river basin management, as Tola has mentioned at the end of the day, through mainstreaming it into the Nile Equatorial Lakes Investment Program and projects, as it is an environmental components of each project and program. And of course, we urge or encourage countries to mainstream the conservation investment plans developed to their national planning and investment projects through their national annual and 5-10 years plans, and of course considering wetlands management as a very important green infrastructure, which is supporting other sector ministries like ministries of water, energy for hydroelectric power, for instance, fisheries, and all other livelihood, and of course in disaster management and reduction of maybe drought and floods in some areas. So it is quite important to reconsider wetland in that accord. And of course, work with financing institution and mainly private sector into bringing them in investment of these green infrastructures in the region. And now I would like to request all the presenters perhaps to switch off their cameras so that we see their faces all together. And I would like to welcome the governance member from Uganda, if around, to give us the comment on the investment plan. If you have the technical advisory committee member from Uganda, please, you're welcome to give us a comment on the investment program just presented lately. I think while waiting for Uganda, if DR Congo is in the room, please, you're welcome for a comment. I think they are also not in, but I would also like to welcome Tanzania to give a comment in the last presented Wetland Investment Program. And now I don't see any hand raised, and if I have any technical problem at my end that I don't see, please, technical group, can you please allow any raised hand to give a comment for the investment and of course, the whole management science, policy, governance, and investment at the Nile Basin. Since we don't have any hand, I would like to welcome our partner, GIZ, who have been hand to hand with us to give us any comment in the Wetland Investment Program in the region. I guess Dr. Malte is around. You are welcome.
Yes, Aliki, maybe if you allow me, Dr. Malte, he's not around, but there was we wanted to say something from the GIZ perspective, and it has to do with the fact that even though we see those big figures and big numbers for implementation of these management plans, I think we have to recall, number one, that this is a serious investment, bringing out this idea that you have been speaking about, the natural infrastructure. I think this is very important that we stress the fact that that investing in these wetlands, it might have a higher return than investing in traditional infrastructure, and also highlighting the fact that it's not a either or proposition. We're not saying that we're not gonna invest in other types of mega structures, but what we're saying is that we need to have a mixed portfolio of green and gray in order to fully develop not only the potential of the water resources, but also of the basin, and therefore unlocking the potentials for distributing benefits more equally among the different countries part of the basin. That's one. The second one is, as we move forward, I think it's important that we clarify that we have already started implementation of those management plans with the countries, with our partners through the NBI Wetlands program. We have started with small activities and with small seed activities that hopefully they will grow as we phase out and others come in. But I think it's important to highlight, especially to the participants, that we're not starting from zero, or the ones that come later after us will not start from zero, but we have already started, and congratulations to the countries for that one. And finally, just stress the fact that this is not something that is going to be done by one single development partner, one single organization, or one single country. I think I want to echo Uganda's call for doing more within the countries. I think that one is very much welcome, and it's also the approach that we would like to see as we move forward. This is an effort of everyone. So as we think in the topic of this Nile Basin Development Forum, how to rethink regional investment, I think we also need to think how to mobilize more stakeholders to make sure that we are moving together, and then we have a good mass to implement these webinars. I think there was one specific question which I thought it was very interesting on how does the Nile Basin Initiative plans to upscale all of these efforts that we have heard today. We have zoomed into the Nile Equatorial Lakes region. We have heard from 3 and 4 different landscapes. And I think the good thing is that we have here with us Mr. Leonard Takwani, our regional expert coordinator for the Nile Basin. So he can tell us a little bit more of what are the efforts that NBI is doing for upscaling this, and how the wetlands program fits within the bigger Nile River resource management and give us also a flavor of what to expect in the upcoming days. Thank you, Sadiki, and over to you, Leonard.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Sadiki. And of course, also thank you to the presenters, and of course, for those who are participating in this first webinar of the Nile Basin Development Forum. It is very clear that managing wetlands from at the national level, wetlands which are at the national level, is very difficult. This is because of many interests, encroachment, and competing uses for these wetlands. It is even more difficult to manage wetlands which are shared between 2 countries, 3 countries, or 4 countries. And that is why in today's webinar, through the work of NBI and partners, we have seen the development of wetlands management plan and the conservation investment plan. So this is a very big milestone, because this then lays a good framework under which you can manage this transboundary, which are very difficult to manage, because you have to bring the communities to talk together so that they can manage the common resource. You also need to bring the governments, both at the local government and the national governments, to come together so that they can talk and manage the resource. So the wetlands management plan and the conservation management plans at that transboundary level is very key in managing some of these wetlands. So this is a very big milestone leading us to a better future for our wetlands. So with regards, the NBDF has got many webinars, but the webinar for today and other webinars which are coming, there are a lot of webinars which are coming under the wetlands environment stream. Today we have had the webinar on wetlands management and conservation investment plans. The next webinar, the same time tomorrow, it's a webinar on wetlands, peatlands, and climate change. Very interesting webinar. NBI and its partners have done a very pioneering study on peatlands. Peatlands are very interesting and unique ecosystems. So it will be great to join this webinar and hear more about these peatlands and their role in climate change, which will be very interesting. On 11th, we have another webinar with a special focus on South Sudan and Sud wetlands. Sud wetlands is one of the biggest papyrus wetlands in the region. Sud wetlands also is responsible for release of a lot of methane and carbon dioxide. Sud wetlands also allows a lot of peatlands and a lot of biodiversity. So we have a special focus, a kind of webinar focusing on South Sudan. So it will be very great to also participate in this webinar. And then on 12th, same time again, we have a webinar on environmental flows and water allocation planning, so that we don't only allocate water for livestock and for human consumption, but we can also allocate water for ecosystems. So this webinar is also very interesting, coming up with some studies which have been done by Nile Basin on Mara, but also at the Basin line. So this is a very interesting webinar for us to join and see. Then we have another webinar on 15th, same time. This is very interesting. It is a webinar on economic valuation of ecosystem services. NBI has done new fresh studies on some wetlands in the region, and they will be sharing about the economic value. And this is very interesting because of one of the issues we face in wetland subsector is that when we present our case, for instance, with the finance to invest on this wetland, they ask us, what is the contribution of these wetlands? What is the contribution of these wetlands to the economy, and how are they helping the livelihoods? So this webinar will share some of these insights about the value of this wetland. So please, let's join this wetland. And then on 16th, we'll have another wetland on how we can use Earth observation to generate knowledge base about our wetlands. On 16th, same time. So these are interesting webinars that we will wish to welcome. And within the Nile Basin Initiative, Our wetlands program is about building the knowledge base, and it's also about building the capacity of both the state and the non-state actors to be able to spearhead or to provide stewardship in the management of these wetlands. So welcome to NBDF. There are many webinars, but those are the highlights of the coming webinars with regard to the wetlands and the environment stream. Thank you, and I return back to Carlos or Sadiki. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leonard and Carlos. And I would like to thank the government of Ethiopia for hosting this webinar, and especially to this, the others are coming in, and our host, the government of Uganda. And I would also like to thank all the panelists who have participated and who has given us knowledge in wetlands throughout this whole session. And of course, more importantly, is to our technical group who are working hard to ensure that we are ahead, and the message our panelists has been sending throughout the region and the globe as well is well went through. And as my colleague Leonard has mentioned, this is just the beginning of the beginning, and we welcome you to actually attending all other webinars as mentioned by Leonard. Until then, thank you and have a blessed evening.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, gracias. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you, Leonard. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yep. Sadiki. There is no tea break.
No, we did it after lunch, so you cannot go for your coffee.
You are not offering us any cocktail or tea.
Not at this time of COVID, brother.
Congratulations, Sultan, Sadiki, and Carlos. Congratulations, very good start for this Nile Basin Development Forum. Congratulations.
Thank you,
It was very good hosting, very good time management. You did a good job. The speakers did a very good job, but you managed the whole webinar very good.